Jason, just 3 questions. The first, on 3 completely different matters. The first is this. In the context of trying to understand more about UKHCDO and the National Haemophilia Database, did you come across any information about a company called Medical Data Solutions and Services and its role, if any, in the National Haemophilia Database?
No.
Okay, that's a nice short answer, thank you. The second question goes back to your evidence this morning about your father's treatment. Were you able to discern at all from your father's medical records any pattern in different types of treatment which he received, or was the administration of his concentrate therapy apparently random?
The unusual thing is, this is something I actually thought about last night and have discussed with nobody. I do think the inquiry should look at, I in my own head came up with this term for it, which was bad batch management. But I did see in my father's batch use history that there were multiple occasions where he'd be given a batch of, say, armour, and then 2 days later he might be given, let's say, a BPL product, and then 2 days after that he'd be given the same product he'd had 2 days before again. And I've given the example perhaps to be looked at the other way around there, where, and you do see this as well, you have a BPL product one day and then a commercial product, and then exactly the same BPL batch after the commercial product being given, which I struggle to see how that would make sense in the context of what was known at the time and what we know now. That is seen in my father's treatment history, and I've seen it because before this inquiry was announced, something that some people would do is send me their batch number treatment history. I wouldn't ask for it, but people would send me it and say, is there anything you can see in this? And I would see that commonly. And I think that is something the inquiry should maybe look into further to see how common that was.
Last question is this. Some of the themes that have emerged from your evidence today relate to issues about openness, candour, transparency. Do you, from your perspective, have any thoughts or suggestions about what could be done to embed those values into government and public body decision-making and actions?
I think there should be a embedded spirit within public bodies to err on the side of transparency rather than caution of what perceptions may be of information. I do think the FOI Act needs reform. I think some of the exemptions aren't necessary. And to be fair, I think other exemptions are necessary. And I think as well, what I mentioned earlier today, that there should be, I think, some kind of clause in the FOI Act which forbids this practice that we've seen through the documents today, where a public body decides it wants to withhold information because it doesn't like the idea of releasing it, and then tries to find any possible exemption to prevent its release that it might possibly stick if the applicant thinks to complain and go to the ICO. I think the FOI Act should forbid that. And I think instead organisations should have an onus placed on them to only apply exemptions where they're absolutely necessary. I also think more public bodies agreeing to embrace the openness and candour charter that, again, Stephen Snowden QC referred to in our opening remarks at the opening hearings of the inquiry, broader adaptation of that charter.
Thank you. So, Brian, do you have any questions?
Yes. It really goes right back, actually, to where you started today, really with your own account about your family and how matters had affected you, and how then the campaigning had affected you. And you told us at one stage that one day you would wake up and say, it's finished. But in almost the next breath, you were saying you felt it would never go away, and you referred to Pandora's box, and you'd never get out of it. How do you see matters resolving for you personally when the inquiry is over?
I think the emotional toll will never be finished. But I do hope that the campaign can finish. And this relentless need that I feel inside to go through the documents and to understand it and to do the work I do, I hope that can finish. I fully recognise that the emotional effects, and for those infected, the physical effects, may never finish, and in fact may get worse. But I hope that the campaign can finish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason, is there anything further you'd like to add?
Yes, and it's only short. I'm grateful to the inquiry for asking me to give evidence, and I'm grateful to everyone who has supported the Factor 8 campaign and to everyone who has highlighted or advanced our cause. 4.5 years ago, I met two amazing people, Des Collins and Danny Holliday from Collins Solicitors. And Collins believed in us and were willing to do what, at that point, in 2017, no one else would, to fight the big fight. And no matter what happens, I'll always be grateful that they gave us that opportunity. And likewise, I'm thankful to Stephen Snowden QC and Brian Cummins for their work in this inquiry and the group legal action. The only reason I sit here now is because my father, Jonathan Evans, was subject to a horrific reality and an early death at age 31 from hepatitis C and AIDS. I was young, but I remember AIDS, the funeral, the drama. I remember the never-ending mental toll it took on my mother. I saw what it did to his parents and to his brother. I knew it could never be fixed. It never was, and it never will. In a way, I think campaigning is our way of trying to fix it. Fooling ourselves that if we win, somehow everything is okay again. But the reality is that for too many of us, there can never be a win for this campaign. There can never be a victory, only a Pyrrhic victory. I'm 31, the same age my father was when he died, and I'll have more years of life than he had. But what's important is that the story of what happened to him and so many other innocent victims outlives me and all of us here and watching. We need the truth, and I hope we can find some form of peace. We do not have that yet. What has been done to us has caused division and infighting. It is the result of the decisions made and not made by those in power. Hurt and loss not being acknowledged and not being dealt with properly. And we know the conversations. Why don't I have what they have? They don't deserve more than me. If they get what they want, I might get less. They've been cured. It doesn't get worse than dead. They're not infected. What happened to me is worse. But it shouldn't have been made to be that way. The government is to blame. Bayer is to blame. Baxter is to blame. Revlon Healthcare don't care. I hope that proper redress, accountability, and the truth can end that. But it's right to say there is far more support and friendship within our community than I would have ever imagined. I know that from the support I get from people like my anonymous friend and Tony and the Trelaw crew and more people than time would allow me to name. I would also like to thank my wife, Briska, for her support and being the brightness in my life. Lastly, I pay my respect to all those who have campaigned and have died campaigning. Their work and the lives of all those we've lost lives on through us. We're almost there. The saddest thing in life is wasted talent, and I hope we make them proud. Thank you.
It's often at the end of someone's evidence that we see how much it means, really see it. So thank you for that. I'm not going to take long because of the hour, but you mentioned how many of the questions that you were asking were met with what you described as obfuscation. Can I just say, you haven't obfuscated in answering the questions we've been putting to you. Thank you for that. And thank you for, through those questions and answers, showing what it's been like to be, albeit a Johnny come lately to the campaigning trail. You've shown us very clearly and methodically and taken us through bit by bit the reasons why you think, first of all, that you have found it very difficult to get the answers, and you haven't got all of them yet by any means, and why that is, and made suggestions and shown us how you reached those suggestions. I think that's enormously valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Now, next week, we don't meet till Wednesday, do we?
That's right, sir. So we're sitting on Wednesday and Thursday, the 16th and 17th of June, for presentations on other haemophilia centres, so haemophilia centres whose policies and practices have not so far been explored in the evidence. It was our hope to cover next week all the remaining centres, but there are just too many of them. So we're going to be covering 30 next week, I hope, in the 2 days allotted. And then the others we will be covering, because we've said we'll cover all, and we will, at a hearing probably in the autumn. I just want to list, if I may, the centres we're covering next week, so that those who will know if it's a centre of particular interest or importance to them. So the aim next week is to cover, and this is in no particular order, the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, Blackpool, Leighton, Myler, Blackburn, Lancaster, Booth Hall, Sheffield Children's Hospital, the Royal Liverpool, Alderhay and Walton Hospitals, Leeds. I'm hoping to do those on day one. And then Aberdeen, Dundee and Inverness. Edgware, Hammersmith, Charing Cross, Northwick Park, Westminster, Hillingdon, St Mary's, Cambridge, Norfolk and Norwich, Bristol, Southampton, Truro, Great Ormond Street, UCH and Middlesex is the plan for next week.
Well, those who are interested will have taken note of what you've had to say. Those who've missed the full list can pick it up on the website with the transcript. So I look forward to seeing those of you who wish to be here joining us next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. So Wednesday, 10 o'clock.